Welcome to coffeeis.me podcast, where me means you, or more precisely, us. This is the show where your host, Valerian, without using any interrogation techniques, convinces coffee professionals to reveal their secrets to teach and inspire you to make better coffee and earn a few bucks on the side, if that's what you fancy. Let the show begin.
Hello coffee friends, as promised, here is the next episode. I do not plan to make 2 episodes a week, but this week is an exception. This is a big one. I interviewed Gwilym Davies, dude who changed the coffee scene in London. He won the 2009 World Barista Championship, and despite of the fact that he trains the best baristas on the world and is a judge on the most prestigious barista competitions, he once said that, get ready, espresso is disappointing. By the way, he's not alone in this. In my coffee career, I met so many coffee people who said the same about espresso, and yet they are the leading experts in espresso. This proves the point that these people are the best baristas of the world. Why? Because they are open about their or products' mistakes and seek constant improvement. I wish I said this clever sentence myself, but I stole it from my virtual barista trainer, Deborah Frodiger. By the way, she is the person behind our online training for baristas, Boot Camp Barista. Special apology to Petra Veselá, Gwilym's wife, and also a spectacular barista and a barista trainer, because it was a beautiful summer evening in Czech Republic and I stole Gwilym for almost 3 hours. As a married man in love with my spouse, I know how important are these beautiful moments. So sorry Petra, and thank you for borrowing me, Gwilym. In this episode, we will talk with Gwilym about his experience starting a coffee cart in London. Coffee carts are one of the best ways how to get into coffee business. They're very low risk and tons of fun. We'll talk about the business versus creative side of a coffee venture. A lot of us wanted to start businesses because we love coffee, but is having a coffee business the same like working with coffee? Gwilym will also reveal a risk factor for coffee roasters what a cafe owner does not have. You will hear from my voice that I got a brain freeze. I somehow did not think about this problem as I should have. He will also talk about what made him start his coffee cart, how did he found a partner in crime, how did they build and run it on a very tight budget, and much more. There's a lot to cover, so let's just get into it. But before, as usually, message from our sponsor. Okay, it's still me. Let's do a small twist here. Because this episode is about coffee carts and baristas, let me do something special here. How about 50% off from our 6-month membership at bootcampbarista.com. Use coupon code COFFEEISME. So once again, coffee is me. Don't use the dot there, just coffee is me. On the Barista for 6-month membership, it will cost you $24 per 6 months. And you can cancel anytime. You can have it for 6 months and cancel, and that's done. Or you can keep it going for 50% off. Or if you don't want to spend any money, there's also the option that you leave me an honest iTunes review, and I will reward one of you guys with a 3-month membership to Boot Camp Barista. Alright, that's it. Let's listen to Gwilym. Hi Gwilym. Thank you for accepting my invitation to this podcast.
No, it's a pleasure, Valerian.
You started and still own Proof Rock in London, which changed the coffee scene in London. You are famous for expressions like espresso is disappointing. You are World Barista Champion of 2009 though, right?
Yes, that's right.
So I cannot imagine a better guest like you.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
Well,
it's definitely been a fun journey.
Yes, it was. And you have a lot of business experience behind you, and I want to pick your brain because of that.
Well, I'm one of those strange people that I actually have a business degree. But I'm not a very nice, and I've managed cafes, and I've turned cafes into very successful businesses. But I don't like the way that I turn out when I focus solely on business. I've been through quite a journey myself that way, where I really enjoy the creative side, and I find that if I don't have fun while I'm doing the business, then I become a terrible person.
I know that, and this is the same situation with me. Not too many people know, but my first coffee business was actually a cafe in my town, Komárno in Slovakia. I called it the Barista Cafe. And nobody knew in 2001 in Slovakia what barista means.
Not many people in London 2001 knew what barista was. That's funny.
But in a tiny town, in a hidden place, there was a barista cafe in Komárno. But
Wonderful.
I hated it. I did not do coffee too much. What I did was mostly managing the business, managing the employees. And I don't like that.
It's like, because we get into it because we enjoy coffee,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the past. It's like nobody would have got into specialty coffee if they didn't really love it, because nobody knew what it was. It wasn't going to be a successful business model. Maybe we had no idea where it was going back then.
This is also a good point, because everybody in a coffee roasting world, which I'm more familiar with, wants to start a coffee roasting business. And coffee roasting is fun. I find it one of the most fascinating parts of the coffee world. But coffee roasting business is a different thing than roasting coffee. And a lot of coffee roasters, they start businesses and they fail because they go like, this is boring. I have to do all the tax papers. I have to do all this, pitching, and I have to do all this marketing. I just want to roast coffee.
And with a roasting business as well, I mean, the importance of cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can ruin your business. Purchasing coffees, waiting for wholesale clients to actually pay you, and what happens if those cafes go out of business. And owning a cafe or a coffee cart is so much easier. You get coffee from your coffee roaster. You don't pay for it yet. Then you sell the coffee, and then a few weeks later, I pay my roaster. It's amazing. It's nothing like that when you are actually opening a roasting business.
I never thought of this about like this. I never knew how these baristas and cafes think. Hey, I caught you, so that's good. That's good. So let's go. Let's go from the beginning. Let's go from the get go. And one of the reasons I invited you, I'm a bit selfish. We are thinking to open a cafe or something.
Yeah.
And I was motivated by your lovely wife, Petra. I had her as a guest on my Slovak podcast. So
Yes. Thank you for giving me over an hour's peace and quiet. I really enjoyed that. It was great.
Oh, come on. You have to be nice to her. She's awesome. I got a lot of good information from there. And I was going to take it next step further. And I'm thinking that perhaps we should start a cafe. And you started with a coffee cart, right? Tell me more about that coffee cart. What was that?
Well,
what kind of coffee did you sell?
I sort of did. The problem with talking about my past is that I've been involved for a long time, since last century, in the late 90s. So I've been on a little bit of a journey myself, managing other cafes, and before that, I was managing things within the civil service. So I was working for the government in the UK. And then I was working for health clubs, and I ended up managing those. And then I got into coffee, and I loved it. And then I ended up managing cafes, because it was the only way forwards. That way to actually pay your rent in London was to go upwards and become a manager. The problem with that is it was exactly the same as when I was in the gyms and working for the government. It was just using coffee instead to create the income. Luckily or strangely, I was living on a boat at the time in London. And one morning I woke up and went, that's it, I'm done. I've had it. I've had enough. So there's Jenny Brown is just waking up. Jenny, shh, it's okay. So I untied the boat and just left London, left the manager's job, went off. And then did a few things for a couple of years and came back. And one of the ways of just getting into coffee was to take a cart, literally a builder's trolley, 4 wheels that builders use to move bricks and things. And we built a wooden base, put an 11-year-old linear on top and a super jolly from Mazza, and just started selling coffee on a food market. and really, really got back to basics. So all I was focusing on was coffee. Yeah, it was in many ways not a business. It was just I need to get to grips with this coffee thing because I've managed cafes, I've made them profitable, but I really don't understand espresso. So let's spend a year just trying to get to know espresso.
So that's why you went with a cart, not with opening your own cafe or something. So you wanted to get familiar with the industry?
Yeah, no. Well, I knew the industry, but there wasn't really an industry, to be honest, was there? There was a coffee industry, but there wasn't a specialty industry. What we were doing at the time was creating a market that had never existed before, so we had to put up with all the strange questions, like why is your biggest cup 8 ounces and things like that. It was more like going back to university for me. It was trying to understand, rather than focusing on creating a business, I wanted to do what I loved and able to pay my rent. That was my thinking. It was definitely not, I've got a business and in 5 years I want to do this. Because at the time, there was no 5 years. There was no specialty coffee industry, really, in London.
When it comes to equipment, did you go with the fancy Linea? Because Linea is a kind of fancy espresso maker. Of course, you can get much cheaper ones.
Yeah, but when it's 11 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, 2-group, no flow restrictors. It was quite an interesting journey. But of course, the Linea is reliable and it lasted in the cold weather and hot weather. And it did us proud. But it was definitely not the Strada.
And how about the coffee? What kind of coffee did you use?
At the start, we were using a company that I used to work for, which was Monmouth Coffee. We were doing single origins back in '99 with Monmouth. It was an amazing time. Nobody understood what we were doing, but we had our audience. Then Square Mile came into town, and they started, and of course, they had the knowledge. I was very interested in the people that were coming through the Square Mile roastery, and they were an obvious choice to move to. I mean, we became their first wholesale customer.
In a cart?
Yeah, on a cart. Yeah, absolutely.
Was this something profitable? So were you able to pay your rent?
Yes, I was able to pay my rent, but I was also living on a canal boat in London. I had a business degree. I knew that we had to make a profit. I knew what my costs were, but I could also cope with 3 months of not that many people turning up at the cart. I knew I would cover my costs and a little bit more, because why should anybody change their life to come to my little coffee cart to fund my business? Life in London is very difficult anyway, and very busy. People have their routines. So why should they change their routine to come to my cart? So I knew I had to give it about 3 months before I could attract people to the cart. I was lucky because people knew me in London as the guy that was working at Monmouth and a couple of other places around London. So they linked me with specialty coffee. And to be honest, a couple of people did stop because they saw the Linea as well.
Oh, so the Linea was something which attracted people.
Yeah, even though it was a 11-year-old Linea, we really kept it in good condition. And a few people, they'd heard of it. They were really good times on the car, and I learnt a lot. I really, really learnt a lot about customers and attracting people to the cart and how to deal with them.
So give us some few tips how to attract people to the cart.
I was a little bit utopian at the time. I was very much thinking that I didn't need a brand. So on purpose, we didn't have a name. We didn't use any branding. We didn't have any barriers between us and the customer. The idea was to take specialty onto the street. The customer can walk behind the cart. The customer can sort of like walk all the way around and watch us We were completely visible in what we were doing. So there was no mystery to it at all. It took a little while, but people did come. And in the end, the customers were captivated by it. And on some mornings, customers would come and work behind the cart before they went to work. They went, can I do this? It's like, yeah, come round. What you do is you do this. And so we invited them round. There was no barriers at all. It was like the old days when people would come onto the stages when bands were playing and dance with the band. It was like that.
Wow. When it comes to branding, I kind of started to smile because we did the same. And I think it was a mistake. When we restarted in 2012, the Green Plantation Coffee Roastery, we didn't have a logo. We had the name, which I used for a long time, but, it was a tiny roastery. Because my goal was that the branding should be taken away from coffee. I mean, because we're not buying shoes, we are buying coffee. It's an agricultural product. It's a product which was made on a farms. And those guys work on that coffee for almost a year, right? 9 months, a year, depends where it grows. And then you as a roaster, or me as a roaster, he does work with it between 7 and 16 minutes, depends what you roast, right? And then is a barista who works with it something between 20 seconds to 6 minutes, depending on the brewing method. So obviously the credit goes to the farm, which you never do. So for a long time, we didn't have a logo. And that was a big mistake, I have to say. People are not ready to think about coffee as agricultural product. They still want the brand.
Yeah.
Do you agree on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We were completely utopian, and for some strange reason, we created. I have a cafe called Proofrock now. Proofrock's brand is not actually that strong if you look at it closely. Mm-hmm. The branding of the cart was really strong. We had no name, but we had an incredibly strong brand. Now, because a brand is everything that you do, everything you say, what you look like, how you perform. It's everything. It's not just the logo. Mm-hmm. We never had a logo and we never had a name, but we had everything else. And it was a very strong brand. Proofrock has a logo and a name, but the brand is not as strong as we had on the cart.
That's a very interesting point. So maybe we did have a brand, and maybe we did not need a logo. No, you do need a logo. I learned that hard way. People could not. I mean, it's a human psychology. Unfortunately, we humans like to associate ourselves with certain symbols. I'm a political scientist, so that's something we learn, study. But I was also idealist. I was like, I don't want those humans. I had enough of politics. I had enough of manipulation. Yes. Right? But that.
Oh no, we were definitely manipulating. we were very clever on the cart. We were manipulating, but we were doing it without names and logos, and we were doing it to people who are very much from the media industry in London. So they were not going to be fooled by logos and brands. Uh-huh. And I mean, when you're operating a coffee cart, a specialty coffee cart, in a city where there wasn't much specialty other than like about 5 shops, the people coming to you to work are not going to be people interested in specialty. They're going to be people around you. And when we were living on the boat, there happened to be a lot of people who they were creative, they were musicians, and there was a lot of activists as well. And so they came to work for us. And these people, creative, the musicians who'd not made it yet, and the activists, they know how to create an audience without much money and without sort of great resources. So they were definitely manipulating, but in the nicest possible way.
Exactly. There are different ways how to do that. Yeah, I like that. And I like that you are very honest about that. Do you still remember what was your initial investment to that coffee cart?
Oh, hardly anything. Nothing. It was like, don't even think about investment. It was just arrived in London, nothing. After being away for a little while, I cannot even remember the weekly rent, but it was a part of London that needed regenerating. London has small areas in amongst the rich areas that nobody goes. And if nobody walks down the street, then the streets get taken over by people who don't want to walk down the streets. And so if you put something on the street, there's the eyes and the ears, and the street becomes a lot more safe and more people start coming out. So there was a street called Whitecross Street in East London. And this area had been ignored for a long, long time. Old working class market had started to deteriorate, and the local council wanted to put some energy into it. So the rents were low and there was electricity, but there was no audience. But we were like so confident with our product at the time and wanted to find a place where we could just sit, make coffee the way we wanted to make it.
Was it only one spot, or did you move?
No, one spot.
Mm-hmm.
What we did was there was a manufacturer of woolens that somebody was still manufacturing in it's really close to central London. It's east, but it's close to central. And there was still a manufacturer, and they had a car park. And in their car park, we would leave our coffee cart. And so we would pay them £50 a week to leave it there. And we'd use their water to get water in the morning. And then we would pull it down the street and plug it in to the electricity that the council had kindly given us. And we would sell coffee. And then in the evening, we would pull it back up the hill and leave it in the car park and cover it up. It was a secure car park with a wall. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. And there was another one where we had a Sunday coffee cart on a flower market. And there was an art studio, and they had a shed, so like a little wooden hut in their garden. And we would keep it in there. And then we'd pull it out every Sunday. So we didn't drag it around everywhere.
That's one of the, I would say, attractive parts for me on a coffee cart, that in case of emergency or business doesn't go very well, you can move it somewhere else. But you did it the other way, which is kind of cool, because you said that it took you 3 months to make it profitable.
Yeah.
And what happened after that? It's what should a barista expect from a coffee cart? Where can he take it?
Well, one of the problems we had generally in London in the early days is that we didn't aim high enough. There was no specialty. We were creating a new market. We didn't know where we would go. We made so many mistakes in the early days. One of it was charging too little for the coffee. We were almost like evangelical. It was like, look, taste this. It's really nice, and I'm going to give it to you at less than the coffee place up the road, which isn't as nice, and they're not as nice as you, and So it was crazy. It was a really bad business model. But we just wanted to make coffee, which sounds a bit crazy, really. After 3 months, it's a strange story. One of the guys from a boat next door to me, because we moved around. So my grinder broke. It was the lead. So I rang him up. I went, "Oi, are you in?" He went, "Yes, come down, quickly come down." Because my grinder only works if I hold the electrical lead sort of at a strange angle. So there was obviously a loose connection, which isn't very safe. And he went, yes. And he came down. So he spent the whole shift just holding this and talking to the customers. And at the end of the shift, he fixed it. And he came the next day just to make sure everything was all right. And he picked up what I was doing. And because he was talking to the customers and I was talking to the customers, and we could serve people quicker, we actually made a lot more money. I didn't realize how much more busy I could have been, just by him being there, we were able to go a lot faster. And that's the point when it started to really make a profit, even though I'd employed somebody else.
This is a good point. So you do recommend to have a team of guys at the espresso at the cart rather than just doing it yourself?
Yes, definitely. Now, I think one of the reasons I've done well as a barista is that I have this terrible thing where I have to please people when they come. I feel terrible if they leave and I haven't done as much for them as possible.
But that's a good thing.
Yeah, but it's a terrible thing to have in your personality. But even with that, to be honest, I don't like everybody. There's some people I just cannot connect with. But when there's two of you and you hire people who are not like you, who think in different ways and have different skill sets and different interests, then you cover a wider range of people. I mean, it's much nicer being with somebody who's exactly the same as you. We sort of go through life doing that. But I think in a business, it's good to have different styles of people that together make a team with different skill sets.
If I will start tomorrow cart and I'll hire a buddy of mine and we are all passionate, financially, what do you think? What can we expect?
Oh, don't expect anything because it's going to be really, really hard to start with because every single customer is precious because that customer will go away and tell their friends and they will tell 3 or 4 friends that you are rubbish or they will tell 3 or 4 friends that you're amazing and so lovely. And you've got to build like that, and you can advertise, and you can have the latest like X logo thing, and use the hipster design, and go on the back of that. But it really is not a long-term plan. Being nice to the customers, serving tasty drinks, and ensuring that you will actually know how to run a business is more of a long-term plan.
You said something interesting when we talked about the branding. You said that you had all these artists, intellectuals, activists who kind of created your brand by being there and attracting different way than the nasty marketing ways. How important is that kind of branding versus the quality of coffee you serve?
In the past, it was definitely easy to exceed customer expectations because they'd never tasted it before. It's not so hard, not so easy now. We are making lots of promises, but many of the times we're not really meeting them. The customers haven't fully realized this yet, but the more they learn to taste, the more they'll start to realize that generally we're not meeting our promises. I did it not as a business. It had so much more potential, definitely. And one of my staff members, Lee, has taken it on to be something much more where he's got multiple carts. And it's doing really well. And there's a couple other models in London that are doing well. But I have a terrible personality that gets bored early. So I sort of changed direction. Now, in some ways, I actually regret because there is a huge potential for the carts. Huge. It's hard work, with the different weathers and blah, blah, but amazing potential, being so close to customers.
Do you still visit carts when you see them? Do you go and test their coffee?
I am terrible because I will test everybody's coffee all the time, just because I want to see, I want to see if they're better than me.
Oh.
Because, no, I do. I want to say, no, can they make it better than me? And the others are, how are they coping with those situations? And the others are, this is clearly a terrible coffee place. I want to see how bad it is because I'm stood in a queue for 5 minutes now. And I want to try and understand why people are stood there for 5 minutes and they're receiving something terrible. I like to see what people are tasting and why they're busy.
Why? I'm not. This is a good point. Why would people wait 5 minutes for a horrible drink? Do you know?
In airports, I understand.
Okay.
Train stations, I understand. And sometimes lost tourists. And when the industry isn't developed fully, like ours, where there are certain things that people hearing are good and they're seeing in photos on the internet, they're going, wow, I want to try this, and what's this flat white, and so forth. So they go there because of that. And when I first tasted espresso, I didn't like it, but I loved the people surrounding it. And I wanted to love it so much that I kept going back, and I kept reducing the amount of water that I put into it. And I'm sure there's other people that are going into the places that have the fancy machines and somebody with a beard behind the counter and a tattoo and the white tiled things and the hand-drawn coffee thing and somebody telling you that it's meant to taste that acidic. And you're wrong. I think as the market develops, things will change. But at the moment, the customers are still learning.
So how about I want to start tomorrow a cart. What mistakes should I avoid? Which are the mistakes you see that these carts are doing so often that, it's very easy to kind of eliminate, and we should not do it when we want to start our own?
One, you need to find out, where are you going to go to the toilet? Where are you going to empty your water? Yeah. Where are you going to get your milk from? How are you going to store your milk? Because you don't want a fridge. A fridge is just more electricity and nothing to clean. What are you going to do when it's windy? Because I wasn't scared of the rain or the cold or the hot, but the wind was really scary. It made a mess of things. Can you turn up every single day when it's rainy and cold? And if you say you're opening at 8, you really need to be there and open before 8. And if you're saying you're shutting at 4 or 5, you need to shut a little bit later. It's that whole idea of under-promise and over-deliver type thing.
This is not over. This was only the first episode of the series of 3 with Gwilym. In the next episode, we are going to talk about starting a cafe. Hey, so if you are thinking of starting a cafe, next episode is for you. If you have any further questions, feel free to join our coffeeis.me community on Facebook. Easiest way to do so is just go to coffeeis.me website. On top, you will find a link to the community. This link will take to the group. Just apply and I will approve you, if you're not a spammer, of course. We are new, but we are having a lot of fun, so just come and join us. I would also like to encourage you to say thanks to our guests for sharing all that amazing info and know-how. You can find them on Twitter, Facebook, or send them a little message in our group and let them know that they are special, because they are special. So thank you so much. Have a great one. Until next time. Bye.